Hey, it's Anne Shafer coming at you with a new podcast. I'm calling it The Curator's Choice. It's stemming out of a blog I started at the beginning of the pandemic, and it covers favorite works of art, objects that I acquired for the museum I worked for a few years ago, the Baltimore Museum of Art. Just want to make it clear that I don't represent that institution in any way, but here I am. I thought maybe I could reach more people if I turned it into a podcast than a blog. And some of you who read the blog might say, hey, we've heard about some of those works before, but most of you probably won't have. So I just want to be clear about what's happening and my position in this thing. I've been a museum curator for many years, and now I'm independent. I don't work for a museum in any capacity. I identify as a cis-het white woman, and I use the pronouns she, her. I'm recording this in Baltimore, Maryland, the land of the Piscataway Conoy people. I feel like the positionality statement and the land acknowledgement are important efforts to normalize the practice so that everyone is aware of what's happening and who I am and where I'm coming from. I also started the blog back at the beginning of the pandemic because I thought I had things to say that I hadn't said, and I wanted to leave a legacy for my children. I have two young adult boys. Well, they're men, actually. And I felt like I hadn't had the opportunity to say any of these things while I was still at the museum, and I wanted to get it all down, just in case something happened, frankly. But I understand, and I'm completely aware that I am not an authority. I have a bit of expertise. Sometimes you can call me a subject matter expert, SME, SME, but that word is loaded. And I'd rather think that I'm helping viewers think through works of art and offer my method of how I approach them and facilitate some learning on your part. I'm hoping that the expertise and authority bit is not clobbering you over the head. That would be the last thing I want. So, when I was a curator at the Baltimore Museum of Art, I was a curator in the department of prints, drawings, and photographs. That's all the works on paper. And I've become over time a bit of a print person. I really love prints, etchings, lithographs, woodcuts, etc., etc. And a lot of things that you'll hear me talk about in this podcast will be those sorts of things, prints primarily, but I will cover some photographs and some drawings, I promise. I loved working at the BMA because the prints and drawings department had a study room and we hosted classes frequently. We taught hundreds and hundreds of students that would come through every year. And I would say most of the classes came from the Maryland Institute College of Art, which is the art school in Baltimore, just down the street from the museum. And those were young artists who were trying to figure out who they were and what they had to say. I just loved watching their eyes light up when they saw something that was new or really got them excited. It was just amazing to see what the power of art could do and be for somebody who was trying to figure out who they were and what they wanted to say. I also wanted to share part of my approach for assessing a work of art. This was a topic of a podcast on Plate Mark, my other podcast that I did with Ben Levy, my co-host. And I thought it might be worthwhile to let you know how it is that I approach a work of art. Ben's system is completely different than mine. So you have to go and listen to that episode to hear what he has to say. For me, it's a long list of questions, and I describe them as falling into two folders. One is the emotional impact folder, and the second is the visual impact folder. So it doesn't mean that the work of art has to answer all of the questions in a positive way. I'm not even sure such a print or work of art exists, but the emotional column includes questions like, does the work elicit any feeling, good or bad? Is the work thoughtful? Does it pose more questions than it answers? Is there some mysterious part to it? Is it overwrought? Are there things in it that could be left out? And would it still say the same thing? Could it be reduced? Could it be said with less? Does it have a tight conceptual circle? Does the idea translate into the technique of the work? And does that work then turn around and express that idea clearly and well? Does the choice of the technique add to the meaning? That's always a good one. Does it nod to art history in a smart way without being derivative? dirty word? Does it nod to meta? Does it understand itself? Does it make a joke about itself? Is it the product of its own making? Is it what we would call indexical? Does it point to itself? Does the work take an idea and transform it into a conversation starter? And I would always ask myself, is it by a non-white cisgender male? Can we find works that are not that? That was always prime for me. Not to say that I didn't collect works by cisgender white males. Of course, that happened also. But then in the visual impact column, I have these questions. Does it have visual impact? This doesn't mean whether it's large and colorful. It just means that does it elicit a reaction? It's sort of the same as the emotional one. That's truly subjective. It's got to be just a gut reaction for you. Does it express a great design sensibility? Does it have a range of lights and darks, wonderful transparencies, interesting patterns? Does it capture atmosphere, if that's appropriate, or reflections in water, or even ephemeral things? Does it enhance its own delicacy or roughness? Again, this is that idea of technique. If you're trying to describe something delicate, maybe a woodcut's not quite the way to do it. Although if you succeed in doing that, well done. Is it readable, legible, comprehensible, or is it utter nonsense? Is it more than decorative? That's sort of a deep and hard one. I've softened in my approach to decorative and beautiful things. But as a museum curator, there was definitely I don't really even know how to put it. I would never propose a work that was decorative. Let's put it that way. Does it cross disciplines in an interesting and meaningful way? Does it tell a great story? Most importantly for me as a curator, if I were presenting it to a committee or my colleagues, how much is there to say about it? Is there 30 seconds worth or 30 minutes worth? That's really the bottom line. How much meat is there in the thing? So on the podcast, we'll tackle individual works of art in short episodes as we move along. We'll talk about drawings and we'll talk about photographs. Of course, we'll talk about prints. We may even look at books. Not sure. We'll have to see. If you have a proposal for a book to talk about, shoot it my way. It's a way for me to express my passion for works of art that convey something and help us understand our place in the world. It might help us understand that artists are uniquely suited to say things out loud and proud, I like to say, that in fact, creativity is really the best part of humanity, that it's the thing that sets us apart from animals. So my plan for the Curator's Choice podcast is going to be sometimes to represent posts that I've already written for my blog. Sorry, but there you are. And if you're interested in finding that blog, you can go to my website and shafer.com. You'll find them there. But I also plan to look at more contemporary works, things that have been just created, and dig into how I would assess them and pitch them to the museum. I also want to answer your questions. In the podcast that I created with Ben, which I hope you'll take a listen to, of course, we talked a lot about demystifying the idea of the curator in the ivory tower and the scary museum on the hill, the Greek temple facade, the marble building. And this is my effort to demystify curators. I mean, I'm sure there's plenty of curators who don't want to talk to the public, but I'm not one of those. So this is my effort to open up myself and access to me, to you, and to start a conversation. I want it to be open. I want it to be welcoming. I want it to be non-authoritative. I reiterate that it's only my opinion, and I don't represent any institution doing this podcast at all. I have to make that clear. And I also want to say I plan to include links to images of the featured works in the show notes. So hopefully that will be helpful as we discuss visual art in a non-visual way. But I'm also going to put up the video versions of these episodes on my YouTube channel. And on the video versions, I will include images of the works. So join me for the Curator's Choice. This is obviously our intro episode. Episodes will drop every other week, and we'll tackle a single object in each one. The Curator's Choice is produced by me, Ann Shafer. I do my own sound mixing, believe it or not, and I'm using music from Michael Diamond. He's a terrific musician, and he's allowing me to use this theme music for free. It's really wonderful, and I thank him very much for that. And I guess that's about it. Yeah, that's the cat. So let's do this thing.